I was about 19, and I had got laid off from my job. I was in a car accident. I was losing my relationship, and anything else that you could possibly think of that resulted in me reflecting in my life. And I felt like something had to be different. And that's when I began that connection with that inner knowing.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Just Like Me podcast. Back in high school, Leroy didn't have the language for what he was feeling: stress, responsibility, the fear of becoming another story in the cycle of poverty. So he picked up a pen and started writing verses. Fast forward a decade, and Leroy is now standing on stage in sold out theaters performing his hour-long one-man show. In this episode, Leroy tells a story of becoming an artist. But this isn't only an artist's coming of age story, it's a story of peer support. The heartbeat of peer support is simple but radical. It says, "I've been there." Not "I'll fix you," but "sit with me while we breathe through this together." And in the rooms that he builds now, Leroy brings together his neighbors, students, and friends to reflect back on the truth that we get through by getting through together.
Okay, so we're going to just start with a question. What do you think young Leroy, maybe high school age Leroy, is teaching present day Leroy today?
That's a really good question. I think he's teaching me that it's okay to live a little and relax and be childlike and have fun and explore and be adventurous and not feel so serious all the time. I think that Leroy didn't have a great understanding of when to be disciplined and serious. And so I kind of jumped to the opposite end of the spectrum when I needed to as I grew older. And now I'm like, I actually need a lot more of that in my life these days. It's not that my life isn't fun or that I don't find joy and smile, but it could definitely be a lot different. So that's what I think he's teaching me.
Nice. How is that showing up for you? Do you see that showing up in different ways?
Yeah, it especially shows up in my art and when I'm performing. I have the most fun when I'm performing, especially when I'm performing with friends. And as I continue to build a life that is very well connected and not a life that I have to like sever parts of myself with, I feel like I can really be myself in most of the spaces I'm creating for myself these days. And it's like, how can I still bring my child self into my current life without feeling like I'm out of place? And I think I have the community to do that with.
You live in Dayton, Ohio, and I'm just curious if you can share a little bit about what it was like kind of growing up in Dayton and grounding us more in what you experienced as a child in terms of what you might have needed then that you're providing yourself now through these different like playful, fun activities that you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Growing up in Dayton, I never got to see much of the city. I only really got to see my neighborhood. My mom kept me pretty sheltered because of the life she's seen her siblings go through. And I completely understood. I have this poem called Hood Adjacent, which describes this like duality of living in what stereotypically people consider the hood, but also living a life built by my mother that I didn't see as hood or ghetto or too much or inappropriate at all, because I never really got exposed to a lot of those things. And so my life really was on my street, on my block, and I played with my neighborhood friends, and there was a lot of sports. And if I wasn't doing that, I was doing chores, and I was taking care of my household, and I was being the oldest, the man of the house, and making sure things were done and prepared for my mom as much as possible.
Your mom worked a lot growing up.
Yes. I was
You
definitely.
You were there with your younger brother, right? Doing a lot of the household stuff.
Mm-hmm. Definitely make sure dinner was prepared, make sure the chores were done, make sure he was taken care of. When I got home, I was home by myself for that first little hour or two. If I had to get somewhere by the time I got to high school, middle school, I was catching the bus or I was getting, a ride. So a lot of that pushed me into a place of independence very quickly. And so although I love to have fun, I love to play outside, I got cut off from that a lot of times because I had to take care of the house or help out around the house or be more aware of what's going on in that aspect. So
Yeah, you were being taught a lot of sort of adult values around hard work and, keeping on top of chores and meal prep and even getting yourself places on your own. And that fueled some autonomy and independence that's definitely made you who you are today. And I'm wondering, do you recall what failure looked like to you at that age? And as you were transitioning from high school into your 20s, into a college age man, what were some of your fears after having lived so responsibly as a young kid?
mm, I think my biggest fear was living any life that felt like a reflection of most of my family, which was living in these cycles that poverty kind of keeps you in, moving all the time, not having a stable car, not having a stable job, having to like borrow money from different family members, and knowing what that was doing to everyone and how it was like making the relationship feel so fake. But when it came to life, when it came to leaving high school and having to be on my own and figure things out, I was going to go to the military because I felt like that was the best way to figure out a foundation without me worrying too much about my own shortcomings and making that happen. Thank God that there were things that did not allow that to go the place it did, because I think I would have been miserable. What set me back from the military was I had braces, and they didn't have anyone to fix braces if anything went wrong in basic training. And so I went to Wright State, and then I joined ROTC. The ROTC was where I figured out, the military isn't for me. And so I continued with the computer engineering.
And at that point in your life, it's really, for all of us at that stage, there's so much swirling and there's so many what ifs. And tell me a little bit about how you felt as an engineering student and what sort of beliefs eventually drove you out of that as your career path.
My beliefs were still given to me. They were still not my own. They were mostly about making money and having a nice education to be able to look good in other people's eyes. And so engineering, I loved. It felt like the greatest compromise because I love math and science, but it was a job that was going to make good money, and it looked good to other people to say I'm going to college to be an engineer. And so collectively that kind of just steered me in that direction. But when I got there and I sat at the computer in the engineering department doing coding homework, I'm like, this does not feel right. And I still didn't know what to call it, but I knew, and I wasn't even completely in touch with my intuition or my inner knowing at that moment. So yeah, it just felt so boring and so uninteresting.
Yeah, you said you weren't in touch with your inner knowing yet. It's really
Mhm.
interesting to hear you put it that way. And when do you think you became more in touch with that inner knowing? What was it that shifted for you?
The first real poem I think I ever wrote, I had just got caught smoking marijuana, and it was something my mom hated, and she like got on me so hard, but it was because of like the stress I was feeling in high school, the pressure that I was feeling, and it felt like a good escape. And I didn't have any other solution because my family wasn't the type to talk about things. They weren't the type to handle mental health issues, barely acknowledge it at all. And so my mom and my dad both asked me, why? Why are you doing this? And, I gave my reason that I'm stressed out. There's a lot going on. And then the response is, why? What could you be so stressed about as a child? What could you possibly be dealing with that would be so heavy? Like, it was just this belittling of what experience I could be having as a teenager. And so I wrote a poem. And that was the only way that I could explain what it was that I was dealing with and how heavy it felt for me. And like I said, I think that was the first like real poem that I had wrote, and I gave it to them. They both read it, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear any response. I didn't get any questions. It just was okay. And I'm like, I don't know if this is good or bad. And I also didn't know how to carry that conversation forward. And so I kind of felt like a bother. I kind of felt weird for writing a poem to explain that. But I also was like, I guess it was good enough for them to not.
Punish you
Yeah,
necessarily.
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, like that was also how I dealt with my own mental health, was like brushing it off. Whenever I felt anxiety back then, whenever I felt depression back then, it was just like, this is all in my head. It's not that serious. Just, you know, it happened. Let's continue on. But it wasn't just getting pushed off. It was being suppressed until it built up. But I didn't continue writing poetry in that type of depth because it wasn't encouraged either. It was just kind of left there. And so I found poetry in 2014, just maybe a year and a half after I flunked out of my freshman year of college. I was about 19, and I had got laid off from my job. I was in a car accident. I was losing my relationship. Anything else that you could possibly think of that resulted in me just sitting on the couch reflecting in my life. And I felt like something had to be different. I'm having to literally face my mental health. Something needed to change. And it just was, everything in me was searching for that answer. And the only place that I knew where to search was internally. It got so bad that like physical aspects were manifesting because of the internal stress, like specifically like a rash that I couldn't see it. There were no bumps, there were no redness, but I was just itching bad. And I went to the doctor and he's like, there's nothing here. There's no cause, there's no thing for me to diagnose. Like I'm pretty sure it's just stress. And so I'm sitting on this couch writing poetry because of my mental health. And that is my only way to make sense of it. That's my only way to get through it, is to write through it. And at this point, I'm so engulfed in the process that I'm writing at least one poem a day for like 9 months.
Wow. And when you left, how did that feel to share the news with your family after knowing what you knew about their expectations of you for what success looked like?
I don't even remember sharing it. It just kind of went unspoken. I was on this break as I declared it, and it just never got talked about because the next chapter ended up being poetry.
When did you realize that poetry was going to be enough? Because you said you want a break. When did you realize it was going to be enough?
After my first show, it felt like I walked into a whole new world. And I found this King of Dayton Poetry Slam. And I was like, at that point, probably for the first time that year, for real, my spirit was like, you should do this. I had never been to an open mic before. I had a terrible anxiety before that. Even my school presentations, I was sweating profusely. I was stuttering. I had this deep hole in the pit of my stomach. Like, it was terrible. And for some reason, I felt called to perform on stage for a poetry slam. I don't even know what a poetry slam is. But I'm going to do
it. Amazing. Yes. Go, Leroy, go. Go, Leroy, go.
And when I got up there, and I was like lower in the lineup, and I'm listening to poets go before me, and I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? Why did I decide to do this? I must be insane. And they called my name, and I had rehearsed this poem to the point where if I'm thought about messing up, I wouldn't, because the words were just that ingrained in me. And this specifically happened because this was also in the midst of me losing a family member that I was pretty close to. And while they were in the hospital, I couldn't do anything but sit in the parking lot and rehearse this poem. And so that was being carried with me as well. And so I performed that poem as best I could while my legs were definitely feeling like they were going to just fall off from under me. I could barely see anybody in the crowd. I don't even know if I was looking hard enough. But when I got off the stage, the host came back and was like, yo, that was dope, son. Like, and he's from the East Coast, so Jersey. So he was like, yo, that's dope, son. Definitely come back, man. Hey, don't just talking me up. And I'm like, what? Like, that's how it went. And it was hard to accept that. But like, got to connect with them after the show, and they literally called me. And everywhere they went in the city, they called me to come with them. And I fell in love with it after that. And I knew that this is where I was supposed to be, because every bit of it was just fulfilling, and the people were so authentic, and it just felt welcoming. It was something that I had never felt before, but it felt the most authentic than anything I had ever felt.
What we owe to one another is like, what does the bee owe to the flower? You know? Okay, it's like what do the plants owe to our lungs, right? Okay, all right, see. What we owe one another is as the flame owes the candle, or the wind, the sail. Only a phantom would answer nothing. All right, my brother.
Starting revolutions and shit in the basement and stuff. And,
All along the journey, you're sort of feeling through what is the right path for you in order to become who you're meant to be. And I'm wondering, can you share about James Baldwin, your favorite author? Share a little bit about how he inspired some of this path once you got on it, and how he mentors you today.
Yes, absolutely. Around 2017, 2018, I had given up my life that I had built up until that point, in which poetry was still a thing, but I was still working jobs that were dead end, that did not have meaning to the purpose. And I had finally quit and decided to just like start moving in the direction of where I wanted poetry to take me. And so one of my first jobs that I got when I came back was in the organizing world. And someone close to me was reading James Baldwin, and I was working at the library. So I had started picking him up, and I had started diving into his essays while I was on the job at the desk. And I read a couple of his essays, specifically The Struggle for Artist Integrity, and I think it was Mass Culture and the Artist. And this was at a moment where like I was at a really pivotal shift in my artistry. Again, I had just given up everything from my old world and started setting on this new path and really moving from my place of purpose. And I read his work, and he completely understood the perspective of an artist, and everything he wrote that I read felt like I was reading like my own journal in a way from the future. But so it was from the past, and it was like someone who had been here before. And then when I also moved forward in his work, and I watched him talk about artistry, the perspective of an artist, into how the artist is a cornerstone for the community that they exist in, and how the community that they exist in built that artist, produced that artist because they needed him, whether they were conscious of it or not. And realizing like, okay, like this is my role as an artist. My community, my hometown of Dayton, Ohio has produced me from these circumstances to be what it needed. And here I am with these ideas and solutions to bring it forward. And he was everything I needed as far as inspiration and understanding to actually play that role, to be on the path that I felt like I was being called to. So
I'm wondering, in all of this, you've made this decision to stay the course, to focus on poetry. James Baldwin being one of those mentors who has been in the spaces of doubt where you've been, and has wondered sometimes if he'll have made the impact that he had wanted to, right? And I'm wondering for you, when will you know you've made that impact with poetry, and what will that look like for you?
That's a deep question. When will I know I have made that impact? I think I will start by saying I think I have made that impact. And I think it is also a part of my duty to continue making that impact, because that type of work is never done. And as long as there is energy and breath in my body to do so, I will always be there to make that impact in a new way, because it doesn't necessarily come in the physical world as the impact. It starts in spirit. And so I know that I've made that impact because I've looked people in the eye as they came to talk to me on their own to say, this is how you've changed my life. This is how you've influenced my thinking. This is how you've inspired me to move and see life. And I want to support you, and I want to help you, and I want to make sure that your mission comes to fruition. Like, I've had those conversations many, many times, and I don't think there's any better mirror than the people to show that, you're on that path. My last show, Baritone Hue, was a reflection of a very hard time that I had with poetry, and believing that I was still fit to walk this path and this journey. And finally taking one more chance to be proved wrong that this really is worth having faith in, on this trip to Paris for this James Baldwin Writers Conference. And I was there for a whole month. And during that time, James Baldwin showed up and felt like he left Easter eggs for me along the way that were in the name of his own journey, but also very, very connecting with mine. And it was like the universe, God was at the center of it all, just laying it all in place. And I know that so many people struggle, so many artists struggle with bringing their ideas to life, living the life that they want to live, trusting in the process, having faith that things will blossom the way that they need to. I know a lot of people struggle with that. I know a lot of people give up on dreams because that unpredictability, the unknown, is so hard to deal with. But I felt like laying out this story was going to be the thing to help people understand that, like, when we truly dedicate and commit ourselves to something that we want to see happen, it comes out. So that's what the Baritone Hue was about, and that's what it meant for me.
Take me on to the stage that first night, and what was that like?
I want to take you, let's say, a day or two before the show opening. I had a dress rehearsal, and I wanted to make something very exclusive for the people who donated to my trip to Paris. And so I sent out private invites to those people, and I invited them to the dress rehearsal to get a sneak peek at the show. And so I'm like, I had just messed up in one of the rehearsals before that. I was super nervous. I'm about to invite people in on this like rough, almost premiere version of the show. And one person showed up, but that kind of just like was like, okay, but it's okay. Let's just hope this is different for the night of. But that kind of set the nerves for the premiere night. And so it's the night of the premiere. I get there extra early. I have this routine for show nights. I don't do anything on show days. I need all my energy. I need all my capacity for the show. I'm sitting in the green room, just looking at myself in the mirror. And it's a one-man show, so I'm the only one back there. And it just felt like the longest time ever for the show to start. And I just allowed myself to lean into preparing my spirit for the moment, talking myself through it, taking breaths, and just allow myself to sink into the moment. And at that point, I think somebody came to check on me a couple times. The executive producer came back there, said good words. He said, "Oh, it's a lot of love out there." Another friend of mine, hey man, it's a whole lot of great people out there. It's a lot of love for you. Da, da, da. And like that was a reoccurring thing. And they're coming in at separate times. Other people, hey, you ready? You good? You need anything? I'm like, I'm all right. Everything cool out there? They're like, yeah, man, it's perfect. It's fine. I'm not at all as nervous as I thought I was going to be. I feel completely like this is exactly what's supposed to be happening right now. And so the lights go down, the music comes up, I go out, and the stage is set with a chair in the middle. There's like a little section off to my right. There's like my bedroom area, and then there's a little place off to my left. It's like an airport area. There's a riser full of audience in front of me, and then to the left and right, there are risers full of people watching the show there. And I sit in my chair, the spotlight comes up, and the show starts. And after that, it was just this easy, almost conversational, just like, this is everything I played out in my mind type of experience. People laughed with me. I heard their responses, the oh man, like the little comments out there in the crowd that just people are naturally letting out. And so to just be there with all of the things and to be able to hear and experience their feedback, even though it was just like reactions in the crowd, just kind of kept it feeling like, we're here together. We really here. We're really connected. And I felt that by the time the show ended, and it was like this at least minute or two long standing ovation. The room was full. The room was full, sold out almost like just at the edge. And I cried. I cried at the end because I had no idea. And it was the most I couldn't have predicted because of me doubting myself or having this imposter syndrome. I would not let myself feel like that would have had been the reality, but it was. So.
And just reflecting on that, from the standpoint of your high school self who, sounds like you wrote a couple poems in high school, but didn't really ever take that as like a serious thing you could do someday, to getting off that stage and realizing like everything you've done up until this point culminated in this moment of togetherness, connection, belonging, synchronicity, vibrancy with your community, support, love, all that. One of the things that you had said was that right before going to Paris, you were starting to doubt and question your journey. You'd mentioned different moments in time where anxiety had gotten the best of you, and moments where you felt completely nervous walking on a stage your first time at the spoken word performance. And I'm just wondering, when in all of this did you tap into that aspect of yourself and say, you know what, I need to be part of something that grounds me and my own mental health, and that I can also be a peer and advocate for others who are on the same journey?
Yeah. Once I discovered poetry became my passion, but it also became a hustle, and it became a solution for what I was missing in terms of money, in terms of opportunities. And so I tried to pimp it a little bit. It was going to be my make it moment. And it's funny because James Baldwin says you have to decide if you want to be famous or if you want to write. And contrary to popular belief, those two things have nothing to do with one another at all.
Amazing.
Right? And so in 2020, I had just started Baldwin Cafe as a bookstore, and that had to close because of quarantine. Any type of shows that I had booked or events that I was planning got canceled because of quarantine and the shutdown. The whole 6-foot distance, social distancing, everything that wasn't essential, I was a part of that. And it felt like the world just threw me away. And after I watched every movie on Netflix, I decided to...
There aren't that many good ones.
Right? After that, I decided to start writing poetry. Like, all right, let me stop avoiding this. And things just started flowing. And I wrote a book called Gift of Isolation. I had a moment where I shared those poems on IG Live, and a friend of mine who worked for OMOS happened to be watching and was like, messaged me and said, hey, have you ever thought about peer support? And I was like, no, I have no idea what that is. It was just like, this is like so close to what you're doing right now. I would love to talk to you about it and see if you're interested. And so I got the rundown on what youth peer support was. And I leaped at the opportunity to be able to start working in mental health, to start seeing poetry in alignment with storytelling in a way that is acknowledging the reality that we're really living with here. And from there, got trained as a trainer, got trained as a peer supporter. And it started to open up so much in terms of what the purpose of my poetry was, realizing that after all of this time, poetry found me and I found poetry because it was helping me understand myself. It was helping me make sense of my world. It was helping me process the lessons I needed. It was giving me the tools to handle the difficulties. I started to reconnect with it in a way that helped me see why it was healing and valuable to me without any of the lights, camera, money, venues, bookings, or whatever. And then these other dreams of being a therapist, of getting into psychology, of understanding how the brain works, of being a good supportive friend that can give advice. All the things were starting to connect in this one realm. And yeah, I'm here today, still practicing that work 5 years later, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and all along the way in your story, it really sounds like so much of your path has been through serendipity, through people noticing your gifts and being like, hey, you're needed here. And you follow that path. You trust what people see in you, which I think is a really beautiful gift. How do you show up for other people in peer support? Do you have an example of anyone you've been able to support recently and what that looked like, and how you bridge the journey that you've been on with the way that you're able to mentor others today?
Absolutely. Communication has become a huge value for me. So learning how to communicate, especially through the lens of being a peer supporter, has been like one of the most helpful things. And like I said, just understanding the human experience and being able to support that has always been an interest to me. So like immediately when I dived into peer support, I started taking in and internalizing everything that I was learning to be not just as an effective peer supporter, but to be an effective person, loved one, brother, sibling, nephew, whatever the case may be. And so that led me to start taking this work seriously. I actually took an opportunity to get into peer support outside of just being a trainer. And so I work with youth in 7th through 12th grade. And during my work with them as a peer supporter, it's an after school program that kind of just is a place for kids to belong and hang out. And we offer programming that is under behavioral health or has to do with mental health and things like that. So it's very rooted in giving them the tools, the life skills to handle what they're going to encounter on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that they know how to face that for themselves and what that looks like for their journey. And there was a moment we were having therapeutic drumming, and all of our kids were in one room, and I just kind of, off to the side, making myself available, was approached by one of our youth, and he was letting me know that he was going through a hard time and he just needed someone to talk to. I walked him over to one of our separate rooms where we could just talk privately, and there was no one extra, no notes, no anything, just me and him having a very real conversation about a real human experience he was going through, which was grief, losing a family member. And I had lost that same family role in my life as well. So I completely understood how much it was eating at him, and I could see it in his face. And I wanted to let him know that I understood, and we can talk through it as much as you would like or as less as you like. If you want the distraction to talk about something a little better, or if you want to get into what the actual thing is. And we walked through it all. What was really bothering him, what it's been building up for him, and how it's been building up. And I was checking in to see, what are his support systems? How has it been impacting how he's shown up in different spaces? And eventually, we got to a space of finding out how we can continue to use his support systems as he moves forward, but also how we can deal with what he's feeling right now. And music is one of the things that he enjoys, which is something I enjoy a lot. So I knew exactly how to approach making music a solution. And so I had some headphones for him. He said he enjoyed listening to music that helps him move through the emotion he's feeling. And I gave him some time to just listen to that and be in his own space for a while until, he felt better. And he took that opportunity. Talking through what was heavy on his heart was helpful, and allowing himself to move through the rest of it through music and just release. He was completely another person. It wasn't all gone, of course, but just seeing his mood uplift, seeing that there was just hope in his eyes when he came back to let me know, I feel so much better, Coach Bean. Like that is the work that I enjoy. It doesn't have to be, it's not the fakeness, it's not the data, it's not trying to get the bottom line done, it's not making sure his schoolwork is done. Like, he's having a very real human experience, and he needed someone to see that, and he needed help moving through that, and to be able to be there in that moment when he was having it. I'm sure it meant the world to him, and it definitely meant the most to me. And it didn't have anything to do with poetry, but it was the essence of why I do poetry, and why I love building community and making those connections.
Which is what is that essence of why you do poetry?
It is, how can I describe it? It's truth. It's authentic connection. And when I say truth, I mean beyond the social constructs of the society we live in and what we're feeling right now, what we're feeling as a result of the reality that we do live in, being able to connect on what our thoughts are, our journey, what we feel, how we treat ourselves, how people treat us. The fact that I can speak and share something that brings someone back to a sense of motivation, understanding, acceptance, peace, growth, those things that are cultivated in a person when they feel supported, when they feel loved. That is the essence of why I do poetry. And that's the essence of why I love being a peer supporter and someone who gets to connect with people in those ways.
It's a beautiful essence that you describe, and I think that lived truth really seems to be one that's also a common thread. Lived truth through communication. You said peer support was the way for you to learn how to communicate with others in an even more positive way, show up even more fully yourself to make a positive impact on those around you. And obviously poetry is one of the most elegant forms of communication. And to that end, as we wrap up here, I want to kind of change the subject, but completely also ground it in some of our realities. Everything that we've talked about, your whole story, I want to ground it in some of that societal construct that you brought up, especially in 2025, where we're talking about success for you and what it looks like for Leroy is where you're at right now. Wouldn't you say? Different from what you thought success was supposed to look like.
Yeah.
But I think you've reached success. Would you agree?
I definitely would agree.
Okay. And so, so much of what we're told, all of us in the United States, globally, is that success means performance, status, power, right? You're choosing to show up in a way that's quiet and gentle and poetic and authentic. And I just wonder about that, because as a man, it's a lot more difficult to show up even in those ways than it is for a woman. And then as a Black man, right? So those layers of your identity and the sort of toxic masculinity, what's true for you in all of that? And what would you say the kind of man you're becoming or that you hope to become? And when you look back in 30 years, you can say, I did it. I became that man. And how do you handle those societal expectations or constructs as you become that man?
Yes. Great question. One that I for sure battle with. Uh, Funny enough, I wrote a poetry book that did not. It's still in my Google Drive called Life of a Black Male Writer. And it was literally about the intersections of being Black, of being man, and being a writer. And so, for one, I think the heaviest thing of being a man and Black man at that is choosing this path of being an artist and realizing that it has nothing to do with the money, with the fame, with anything else. It is all about the authenticity. It is all about the truth. And it stands firm and confident regardless of who's watching or who's paying for it. Knowing where I come from in my Black family, knowing that it's going to be hard to have partners and romantic relationships when most of that revolves around what the man can do as far as providing, and that it's rare to find someone who doesn't expect those things of you, but instead sees you for what value you truly bring. And yet, when it comes to proving it's real, when I gotta pay bills, when I gotta take care of food, when I need to travel or something, it feels like everything is just a lie. It feels like, what have I been doing this whole time? Playing? Like, have I been? Is it not as worth it as I thought it was? Because financially, I don't know how to prove that. And sure, there's a lot of things on my resume as an artist that could say, yeah, I did this, I did that. But at the end of the day, it didn't feel like it took me to the place that I thought I was going to go, that I thought was going to be secure. And then, like, having to be a part of a family where everyone else is taking a traditional route and they're looking at me like, hey, you when are you gonna get a job or something? Or like, are you gonna get a job? Or are you gonna, or they'll look at me and they'll celebrate my poetry to the fullest and then turn around and ask me about my job status or school or education. And I feel insulted. And I hated having those conversations. I hated feeling like to other people poetry wasn't enough, because it started making me feel like this work wasn't enough. And there weren't a whole lot of spaces until I cultivated them for myself to say, these are the people I need around me. And it's not that they were yes men or that they didn't give me the real reality of the situation, but they also encouraged and knew the value that I was bringing, because they knew that it doesn't matter what I choose, as long as I'm moving in my purpose, things are going to be okay and things are going to be just fine. And so it took that. It took surrounding myself with people that celebrated the value instead of feeling like it brought up an insecurity in them. And I have truly been able to see, especially lately, that people would rather have someone in their life that can provide them with a sound mind, good counsel, loving support without judgment, good communication, and just being able to see them and hear them. That has been valued with the people that are in my life lately more than any money that I can make. So I'm realizing that my providing as a man, my breaking generational curses as a Black man, my value as a writer coming from that male experience, Black experience, is literally what the world needs, is what my community needs. There's far more value in that than there is in anything material that we could ever give. So that's where I'm learning my value is, and I'm trusting that.
It's been a long day. One of the most difficult things about doing community organizing work, doing work that is associated with the people in a society where the people aren't being looked after, they aren't being cared for, they aren't being provided for on a level that is necessary for their humanity. The issue with working in fields like that is that, it requires a very large capacity to deal with. You're constantly caring for someone. You're constantly kind of just being present for them, and that requires an equal balance of self-care for you. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is hammered down in peer support, is that you must have a good balance for your own mental health. You must have self-care time. You must release and let go of the things that you experience. And it's challenging. It is challenging. I require deep breaths consistently, intentional deep breaths.
You just turned 30 recently, right?
Oh man,
Right.
yes.
Right. So, and you, and you had told me, prior to this interview, prior to our recording, that milestone kind of shifted some things in you, and you started to think of your routine in life and
Mhm.
how it was serving your life purpose a little
Mhm.
better. What does it look like for you today in this part of the journey?
It's definitely a struggle right now because life as an artist, as well as someone who has a full-time job, there's not a lot of consistency. I don't have the typical schedule someone has where they know for a fact my evenings are free. They know for a fact my weekends are typically free. And they usually fill that time with things that they have to do for adult life and family time. And for me, I just felt out of control at first. And I felt like there was never going to be any balance to my life. But I realized, like, okay, this is not going to do anything but get worse. So where can I find moments in my routine to implement non-negotiables that really do work for me, where I need to spend time with myself? And so as I was getting into this journey and I noticed the consistencies in the pattern for shows, for one, I'm like, I can clear my day. I can't have anything before a show. That helps me stay grounded, and it helps me deal with any anxiety or nerves that I'm having without, feeling really mixed up, or like I had to set boundaries with other people. Like, hey, no serious conversations on show days. Like, I can't show up for that. I don't have the capacity on days for that. And then it started moving into more consistent things on the day to day. I realized how long it takes me to get dressed, and that it gives me anxiety when I'm rushing to get dressed and get to work. And I don't want to cut my morning routine short just because I gotta be somewhere. So finding out, like, all right, I'm practicing day to day, trying to get a workout routine in the morning, get up early enough, even if I don't go work out, getting up early enough to get dressed and have some time to sit still before I'm going anywhere. Also getting up with enough time to sit with myself before I talk to anybody, before I have somebody pushing a certain energy into my world as soon as I get out of the bed, and setting those boundaries. And then nightly routines, making sure that I'm like trying to get to bed early enough, because now I know how much sleep I need. Now I know how eating at certain times or eating certain foods interrupts my day or my routine. So I may not be able to take as much off time as people can to do vacations or to just relax for a day, but I can implement things in my day-to-day that help keep that energy level up, that helps keep that capacity at a level that is supportive of the things that I'm doing, taking midday breaks, making sure that I'm breathing, making sure that I have an adequate amount of time between things as I'm putting my schedule together. So those are all things that I'm now pretty aware of, and that I'm trying to consistently implement as often as possible until it becomes a consistent habit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's incredible. And also, like, it's just good to know that linear growth is not real, and that we're all sort of in a constant pattern of learning and relearning what works best for us. And I like this idea of daily vacations, morning vacation time. I like
Yeah,
that. That's a good way to put it. So I'll take that with me.
for
Um,
sure.
and I'm sure many people will take a lot from this podcast today, Leroy. So thank you so very, very much for sharing your story, being so transparent and open and honest like you always are. You are a gift to Hey, I'm Here. We're so grateful that you have been part of this journey with us. And we're super looking forward to everything you create next and all the impact you make on the world. I'm grateful for it.
Thank you so much. It's a blessing to be here, and thank you for making space for me. So I'm very, very grateful.
Just Like Me is produced by Hey, I'm Here, Ohio. I'm Katie Bachmeyer, and if this episode met you where you are, share it with somebody who might need it for company today.